The Honest Network.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back, and this is Morning Express. It is now 23 minutes to 8 o'clock, and it's time for us to get into Political Point. And today, we'd like to take a closer and deeper look at the Building Bridges Initiative report that has received love from some and hate from others. And looking at it from a very balanced perspective, hopefully, to just give us more insight as to whether it's a good document for us or not. And the question that we had asked earlier on is, do you believe the Building Bridges Initiative is an agreement of convenience between certain members of the political class, as suggested by some critics? In other words, it is purely designed to make space for 2022. And those sometimes opposing it, it has been said, are opposing it because maybe they don't have a stake in it for 2022. But the bigger question is, what does it have for the general public, for the Mwananchi? And that's what we'd like to discuss this morning. And we continue with this discussion. We're going to be joined shortly by Professor Ben Sihanya, who's a constitutional law expert. But we continue with Professor Gitile Naituli, who's an ex-NCIC commissioner. And I know, Professor, that it's difficult to paint with a broad brush and say it's a good or a bad document. But let's try and do this on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being a perfect document, 0 being a bad document for this country. Where would you place it?
I would place it at the number 5. And out on a scale of 1 to 10. And partly is because the question we should be asking ourselves is whether we actually needed it. That is the question. Because if you look at the 2010 Constitution, we have Article 43. And if you look at the BBI, 90% of it is about Article 43. It's about, giving young people business, money from business, 4-year grace period, and not that. So 90% of it is things we should have done ages ago, or things that we can do, and it does not need anything to a referendum or a constitutional amendment.
Right.
And then there is that executive section, which means constitutional amendment. So the better question is whether BBI was actually necessary. And my position is that it was not necessary. But because also the argument that Kenyans, we are our nations, because we are meant, Kenya is a country made of nations, that our tribes or nation will be happier to see one of us at the top is really a lie. I mean, if you remember 2002, Mudavadi was appointed vice president. And he even lost his parliamentary seat. So if the lawyers, as an example, they were happy to see him there, they should have at least voted for him. So the truth of the matter is we are not into these positions. What we are looking for is good government.
Right.
We want a government which is not stealing from us.
Okay.
We want a government which is not tribal, which follows the Article 232 and Article 10 clearly.
And there are those who argue that the only way to have that government is to ensure that we enshrine some of these principles in law, which is why now the Building Bridges report comes as a result from what they've said of what Kenyans have to say. So if you're saying that it is not necessary, what do we do with what Kenyans have had to say in regards to the data and the information that has been collected by the Building Bridges team that was appointed?
Those principles are already in the 2010 Constitution. We talk about inclusivity. That is Article 10, Article 232. Let me just give you a very innocent example. There is nothing in law which prevented the president, for example, when he was forming the current government, we have 44 tribes. So he could have taken one cabinet minister from every tribe, and he would have 22 tribes. Then he would have taken the principal secretaries from the tribe that did not provide a cabinet minister, and right there, you would have 44 tribes in the central government. So there is nothing in law that prevents this current government, for example, from being 100% inclusive. What we need is honesty here. We need total, complete honesty from our leader to tell us what do they really want. Because what they want, the inclusivity is just the language for us.
But Professor, wouldn't we be trivializing the question of inclusivity if we brought it down to tribes? Because truth be told, we cannot have every tribe in the government. Inclusivity maybe needs to be broadened to a point where we're talking about resources, equal resources distributed amongst, Kenyans, so that every Kenyan feels that they're part of the country.
I want to agree with you entirely what you just said, and that is why the rationale for the BBI about inclusivity is wrong. Because what people want is resources to reach them. People want the fairness in recruitment. So if you implemented it properly, 2010 Constitution, you implemented properly Article 73 on leadership and integrity, Article 43 on socio-economic, Article 232, Principles of Public Service, Article 10 on national values. You have covered 90%. Now, let me tell you our primary problem, which for some reason it seems to have lost traction. Our problem is to get our electoral process right.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with all the inclusivity people are talking about. We need a method that can reverse that good Kenyan who can now take us forward regardless of which side of this country we come from. You see, the truth of the matter is we really trust each other in this country. We have no problem. We have done this research at the commission. There is no Kenyan who will go to Rongai or to Mathare or wherever looking for an apartment, and then first they find out who else lives here. People find an apartment and rent because we trust one another properly. We don't have issues. The divisions come when the politicians, election time, and that is why a lot of us are arguing the fact that a politician can organize criminal gangs to harass us when they lose elections. It does not imply that we are divided.
That we are divided.
So the division, yes? So this idea that the BBI is supposed to unite because we are divided is utterly inaccurate.
All right.
I think our politicians need to be honest with us and tell us what they want. And let me tell you this, the truth is they will pass it. I mean, there isn't much we can do, really. We are completely helpless. But if you ask me, if they concentrated on implementing the 2010 Constitution and then concentrate on looking at the ways and the means of having an election that we can trust, so that when you lose and they start calling in the street, we tell you to go with your children and your wife in the streets.
All right.
We don't need it.
So
because we know you have lost properly.
Okay. So, Professor, you're saying that whether we like it or not, it will be passed. So, do you feel...
Oh, it will be passed, and they will not solve our problem, because our problem is about an election that we trust. It has nothing to do with all the other things
that they're put there.
About.
All right. And that was you preempted my question, because I was going to ask then, since you feel it's going to be passed, where do you see this nation after the passing of the BBI report? Should it go through? Do you see us in a better place? Are we still going to be where we are, or are we going to be worse than we were before?
I think it will diminish, it will continue diminishing the trust that we have in the government and in our leaders. And this is why I think the president has emphasized twice. I don't know how many people are listening to it. In Bomas, he talked about consensus. In the address to the nation the other day, on the state of the nation, he again talked about consensus. It's very important when you have to do anything with the constitution to bring everybody on board. Because if we now do a referendum without a consensus, 1 year or 2 years before the election, we will carry that raka to the election. And therefore, we are likely to be worse off. than we are now.
All right.
And I think it's important that the political class listen to this president, because sometimes I feel that he means good, but he is not forceful enough, because he has twice emphasized on consensus and the fact that there is no monopoly of ideas on how we can solve our problems.
Okay.
So if the other political players can listen to that, then maybe we can actually do the things which need legislation now and then go to a referendum after the election.
All right. Now, there are those that might argue, Professor, that where we were when Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, did the handshake as we now know it was way worse than where we are now. Would you agree with that? Or have we merely just put a top on all the issues that were there, and at some point it's likely to boil over should we not have that, verifiable elections that you're talking about?
It is both of what you just said, because it was a relief when the president reached out to his opponent and they had the handshake. That brought the country together. It has allowed this government to function, as a government to work, keep us peace, and protect the electoral economic gains that were there. That was beautiful. But having done that, then they needed to strictly address what caused the division in the first place. What was the problem? The problem has always been electoral process that we cannot trust. They should have concentrated on that, in my opinion, and then the implementation of the existing 2010 constitution, and that will place us in a better place. Now, if we put the electoral system in the background, because the proposals there are for parties, primary parties, to nominate people to IBC and so on, we are not creating trust in that institution, if you ask me. Because you have to know what happens in Sierra Leone, not Sierra Leone, in Cameroon, I think, in Sri Lanka. What happens the other day in Zanzibar when the government appointed the electoral commission has simply cancelled the presidential election because the government wanted it cancelled. There's a possibility when you bring parties to IBC, it will lose more trust than it is having now. So the proposals which I'm seeing there, they are not intended to build those institutions. For me, I would have looked forward to a situation where the government does everything to build our faith in all the public institutions which we have created to protect us. The ethics and the anti-corruption, the IBC, this human rights commission, so that when the institutions speak, we trust that they speak for themselves, but not from anywhere else.
Not from any other influence. All right, earlier on.
Other influence. So there's a challenge here we are facing, but I still think that our leaders have always been reasonable, if you ask me. They have always come back and reasoned, and that's why we have maintained this peace. So I'm hoping that from the church, from all the voices which have called for reason, there will be reason, and we don't have to go to a referendum and divided nation, because that will be carrying it to the election, and that will be a big challenge for us now in the future as we go on. Remember what we need to build this economy.
Yeah.
And the economy means trust.
All right, Professor, your thoughts on the fact that we have some who are saying that this document as it is, we've already spent 2 years compiling it, and we need now to at least at some point close and go ahead to the referendum. But there are others saying, look, there are certain parts of that document that we don't agree with, and we need our voice heard. Do you feel like that is a deal breaker for those who feel that there are certain elements of that document that they feel they would like to challenge or question? Would that be a deal breaker in terms of us going to the referendum, or do we have a document that has already got, I would say, a majority of the views from Kenyans, and as a result, we'll never have 100% people in agreement, and as a result, we'll need to move on?
I think the latter, what you said in the beginning, is the correct position if you ask me, because look, the 2010 Constitution to develop consensus took us 22 years. So we are changing 67 articles in the 2010 Constitution out of 261. articles. That is a constitutional overhaul. That requires a consensus. So if the government brings its power, because the government has power, government is God on earth. If it brings its weight into this document and it passes it, it will create a problem for itself, for future governments. It is important to take the counsel of those who think that, look, we are not dying if we don't have this referendum. Let's have a consensus. I think that is so crucial, because also I feel very strongly that these people, the church people and so on, I think they need to go to the president, because he looks like he has a ear. He looks to me, when I listen to him, I feel very strongly that he wants consensus. But there is political forces very strongly pushing to demonstrate power. The government does not have to demonstrate power on its citizens. The citizens know that it is powerful. So it doesn't have to demonstrate
power. All right, let's talk solutions. So what do you see, particularly for the common mwananchi? Because at the end of the day, it looks like they are sitting in a stadium watching, the political circus going on in the center stage. What role do they have, and what can they do to ensure that we don't take this country to the dogs in the name of trying to amend a constitution which we've not even implemented, the Constitution 2010?
I think it is the Wananchi in general really can't do much, but the church, especially the mainstream churches like the Catholic Church, the Conference of Catholic Bishops, the other Kenyans of goodwill who are not emotionally attached to 2022, these people can go to the president, because I sincerely believe this president wants to listen and advise that all the beautiful things in the BBI which require legislation can be rushed through parliament and implemented. The areas which touches on this constitution, the supreme law being given time. That way, we can all move together as a country, and we don't have to have people who think that they were railroaded, they were forced, that the government heavily weighed on them, because also you have to understand that there is one principle about constitutional changing. This constitution actually doesn't have a provision where the government initiates change. The change is supposed to come from parliament, constitutional amendment, or from the public.
Okay.
So the public, the provision for the public, it means that the public sees an important issue and the public mobilizes outside the state. But this is a situation where the state is actually initiating the changes. That is tricky. That is very tricky. So I strongly feel that we need to calm down.
To calm down.
We need to put this, calm down, forget 2022, put this country first, listen to voices of reason, listen to the church, listen to the president. Because twice me have had him loud and clear consensus.
All right.
And then it will be good. We will be good to go.
So assuming the document goes through, Professor, maybe just to hear from you, are there specific areas that are of major concern to you that need to be amended? Should that document go through? Are there areas that you feel these should not be allowed to go through?
I think the area touching on the control of the police by the executive is tricky, because we have been trying to run away from that for generations. The INBC independence need to be maintained. Should it go through, there will be problem, because there is parliamentary parties and there are parties outside parliament, all of which will participate in the election, and they will feel unfairly treated, because it is the parliamentary parties that will nominate those commissioners. So the ombudsman for the judiciary, that is an area where somehow I want to agree with the BBI on the ombudsman, because a lot of situations citizens find themselves where judges particularly bribed. You can't go to JSC. Sometimes you need an ombudsman who maybe can take your case to the JSC. Right. That one I want to differ with the people who don't want judicial ombudsman. But the lack of a very clean electoral system is a problem. It will haunt us. So these are the areas where I think that we need to take a closer look. And then after a closer look, we can have an agreement and then move forward.
All right.
And I think it will happen. Somehow I feel that it will happen because the handshake is a good example of our capacity to agree when we face a crisis. A very good example. So I still don't believe that it's possible to control the passions for 2022 because these passions are very serious.
Right.
Because when even our debate is seen in the light of 2022, if you say we need to correct this one, they may say that maybe that one supported the deputy president. If you say, okay, I'm totally with the BBI, that one is Kieleweke. We need to remove all that and realize that we love this country. We want our children and our grandchildren to have a future here.
Right.
We don't want the humiliation we see the refugees going through. So we want peace. And we're asking our leaders to please give us an opportunity for that peace.
All right. Professor, thank you so very much for joining us this morning. That's Professor Gitile Naituli, who's an ex-NCIC commissioner, giving us his views on the BBI and where we need to go. And he rates it at out of 10, 10 being a very good document, 0 being a pathetic document. He rates it at 5, but also mentions that it is unnecessary at this point in time. Maybe at a later date, but right now it should not be a priority. I don't know what your thoughts are, but a quick reminder of that question that we asked earlier on. Do you believe the BBI report is an agreement of convenience between certain members of the political class, as suggested by its critics? I'll be reading through your comments a little later on, but for now we're going to take a short break right here on Morning Express. A quick reminder, we also have that investigative piece done by Hussein Mohammed talking about sexual harassment, breaking the silence, sexual harassment in our places of work, that we're going to be discussing right here on Morning Express. So for now we take a break. When we come back, we've got more on the other side of the break.